This is an introduction to Adalo. Today we're going to be learning how to build mobile and web applications without code using Adalo. This presentation has been prepared and is being presented by Wadalo, which is a Washington Adalo app studio. Before we dive into Adalo, we need to answer the question, what is no code? Here are a few of the best definitions we could find. From We Are No Code, no code is a visual layer on top of the code, allowing for the dragging and dropping of functionality to build powerful products. According to Uncork, no code is visual abstractions of programmatic functions, making it faster and easier for developers to change the function, flow, and feel of the software. According to I Can Automate, no coder, maker, citizen developer, and visual developer are all monikers that are used interchangeably. So why does no code matter? Well, what happens when 20% of the world can build apps versus just 0.3% today? As Estel Studio says, the democratization of web and app building opens new doors even for non-technical people. The ideas that would have been limited by the skill can now be translated with a simple drag and drop. With everyone knowing how to create professional presentation slides with PowerPoint to everyone being a graphic designer with Canva, anyone who has an idea can be a creator with no code. Let's take a look at the no code timeline and go over a few milestones leading up to the present day. So we're going to begin back in 1840 with a woman named Ada Lovelace. Ada created the first algorithm for Charles Babbage's analytical engine, which would be made of metal gears and able to execute if-then commands and store information in memory. Ada is believed to be the first coder. We'll be discussing Ada in more depth in an upcoming slide. Fast forward 105 years, in 1945, the first programmable digital computer, the electronic numerical integrator and computer, came under development. In the years of building this massive 30-ton computer, the role of the programmer began to take shape. In 1955, Grace Hopper invented the Flowmatic language. Flowmatic was not only the first compiler-based language, but also the first English-like processing language. It originated from Hopper's belief that data processing problems could be expressed in English keywords rather than numbers or machine code. This was the first hint of the future of no code. In 1982, tech visionary James Martin published a book called Application Development Without Programmers. In the preface to this book, Martin wrote, "The number of programmers available per computer is shrinking so fast that most computers in the future must be put to work at least in part without programmers." Martin correctly predicted the tech skills shortage almost 40 years ago and got people thinking about what could be accomplished if and when you eliminated code. In 1985, Microsoft released the original version of Excel, which many people consider the first tool that allowed users to manipulate data without code. In fact, many no-coders today still compare the experience of building on a no-code platform to working in Excel. In 1994, a website called GeoCities was released that made it possible for people to create personal pages, fan blogs, and other web pages using visual programming. Before this, only those who knew HTML could build websites. In 2003, no-code became mainstream with the launch of WordPress. WordPress kickstarted the ability to build websites without code. Today, 38% of the internet is built on WordPress, which is an astounding statistic and testament to the continuously growing no-code space. In the present day, it is safe to say the vision of James Martin of application development without programmers is now realized by the existence of powerful platforms which allow people to build and publish applications without writing a single line of code. We are in the early days of an ongoing revolution in software development where consumers are becoming creators, and the power of great apps lies in whoever is closest to the problem and holds the most domain expertise rather than technical expertise. So I find that when I'm thinking about no code, I like to think of it in a little bit different way. So I use a tool called a socio-technical system design thinking, which teaches you how to think about software on 4 levels. So level 1 is the hardware level, which is the mechanical layer. The level 2 is the software level, which is the informational layer. Level 3 is the individual level, the psychological layer. Level 4 is the community level, the social layer. So when it comes to no code really allows you to focus on just the top two levels, level 3 and level 4, the social and psychological layers. And that is because when you're using a Adalo, for example, the mechanical layer, the hardware, is predefined. So you're either going to be building a mobile app or a web app, a desktop app. Then next, the informational, the software layer, Adalo does that for you as well. So they've abstracted away all the complexity when it comes to the actual code or language that runs your application. And you really get to focus on the psychological layer, which is all about the design of the interface, and also about the social layer, which is about the information that is being exchanged through that interface. And so by allowing you to spend most of your time thinking on psychological and social levels or layers of your of the system that you're designing, you really can think through the lens of human beings and through communities. Like you're designing it for a real person, and you're meant to solve a real problem for that person or for a community of people, right? And when you spend all your time thinking about that versus thinking about how to make some specific feature work, you're a lot more free to solve hard problems, solve problems that you are very close to, and that you can see in your community or you have in your own life. You can actually build those right away because you're just focusing on what that interface is going to look like, what I need to interact with, and then who it's going to allow me to interact with, whether that's interacting with the system itself or in an open app, a community-based app on the social layer. That's going to be allowing you to exchange information with one another. So tools like Adalo and just the no-code paradigm in general are really going to be a revolution in the type of apps that get created, because it's going to be a completely different set of people that is building those applications. And it'll be people that probably, just like myself, never could have imagined themselves building apps because I didn't come from a traditional design or software development background. So this is a development process that I use. So it's an 8-step process that starts with just ideation and brainstorm. So you start by just coming up with ideas either by yourself or maybe on a discovery call with a client or in a brainstorming session with a teammate. Once you've fleshed out the idea, then move on to sketching out the interfaces and writing user stories, really defining who those users are and how you want them to be able to use your app. Next, you'll get into creating a plan, and that plan will take shape as a sitemap and a roadmap. So a sitemap is going to be a visual representation of all the screens and the features and buttons and actions taking place within those screens. So you're creating a high-level overview of it without actually getting into the design yet. I like to do that on Creately. You can also use another mind mapping software. I know Figma is capable of doing that as well. A roadmap I typically will do in just a Word document or a Notion document and just write out all the features that I want on this application. And I like to break that up in bullet points and then do sub points and sub points so you can see things that are embedded within one another. So keep the law of recursion in mind. Nested features is how you'll lay all those out. So whether that's by user type or by the page of the application or the epic, however you want to break that up. Next, when I go into Adalo, I'm going to be taking that sitemap that I've created, and based on that sitemap, I'm going to add screens to the canvas, right? So I'll be actually adding all of those screens so that now the Adalo canvas is going to mirror the sitemap that I've already created. Once I have the screens on the canvas, then we go into the database and we'll configure the database collections. We'll determine what kind of information is going to be stored on our application and how that information is going to surface to the users. And so that will determine the properties within each collection, and then we'll be able to add records into each of those collection that stores all of the properties that we've determined. All of those, whether that's a text property or an image property or a relationship property. After we've configured the database and added some initial data to design with, we go to design the interface with components. So this is when you're dragging and dropping components onto those screens, and you're really thinking about this from the angle of data-led design is what I call it. So you want to think, what data is going to be available for me to work with on this screen based on how the user is getting to this screen. And so how the user gets to that screen is by you adding actions to link to another screen, or actions could also be used to create or update or delete some piece of information that's on your application. So you'll make the app interactive with actions, and then when you take those actions and you move through the app, that's when you can begin to do fun things with the components, like make them dynamic through magic text or calling an image from the database, so you can have one screen that represents 1,000 different records. Like, the final step is an iterative step. So prototype, iterate, and publish. You'll be going back and forth from prototyping, testing the app internally with your team or with a small external group. And then based on their interactions with your prototype, your not yet published version of your app, they will provide feedback. You'll iterate on the application. You'll do that until you feel confident that it is ready. I like to do that as a progressive web app. And then eventually do that in a test flight if I'm publishing to the App Store. So prototype, iterate, and publish. App Store. So prototype, iterate, and publish. And that completes the development process for Adalo. Before we start talking about what Adalo is, we first need to answer the question, who is Ada Lovelace? Because if you haven't already made the connection, Adalo is an homage to Ada Lovelace, who created the first algorithm in the year 1840. So here's a few things about Ada Lovelace. So Ada was born in England on December 10th of 1815. At age 17, Ada met mathematician and inventor Charles Babbage at a town party. She was fascinated by his difference engine, an early version of the calculator. In 1843, notes from Ada were published in English Science Journal, where she described how codes could be created for the device to handle letters and symbols along with numbers. She also theorized a method for the engine to repeat a series of instructions, a process known as looping that computer programs use today. For her work, Lovelace is often considered to be the first computer programmer. So what is Adalo? Adalo is a powerful visual development tool for building mobile and web apps without writing a line of code. Why does Adalo exist? Adalo's purpose is to empower makers to bring their ideas to life. And Adalo believes that a world where only 0.3% of people know how to build apps is missing 99.7% of its potential. Here's a couple great quotes from the team at Adalo. Ben, one of the co-founders, says, "A single person is capable of building something that would have taken hundreds of people a decade ago." Barrett, the partnership manager, says, "Adalo has the potential to be a paradigm shift in software development globally, transforming technology consumers to technology creators." So now we get into the interface of Adalo. And on this next slide, we're going to be taking a closer look at the Adalo interface. And as you can see, it's a very white and bright canvas, and it just has a few different icons, buttons, and text that's overlaid over the top. So we're going to point out what each of those icons, buttons, and text represents and allows you to do. The no-code platform we're using is Adalo. This big button right here is where you go to add components and add screens. Just underneath it, this artboard is the branding section. That's where you change the color and typography of the application. Below that is where you view all the screens of the app, which comes in handy when you begin to build a large application. You can easily find them in an organized manner right there. Following is manage database. This is where you'll set up your database collections and properties and add new records, manage existing records. upload bulk data or connect external database collections. Just below that is the application settings, where you can manage the name, the icon, who has access to the app, things of that nature. Below that is these two check marks. This icon represents the publishing section of the Adalo editor. This is where you'll publish your app to the web, iOS, or Android, being that it is a native mobile app that you're working on here. Below that is this chart icon, and that's what you'll click to view your analytics dashboard to monitor the analytics of the application, where the users are, who is using it, which screens are being most visited, things of that nature. And finally, below that is where you have version history and control. So if you want to create different variations of the design of your app, but you want to be able to revert back to an original version, you can do so in version history and control. On the bottom right-hand corner, we have Access Help Center. In the middle here, we have screens, which is what you're going to add to your canvas. And then within screens, you'll be adding components, and we'll get into that. In the upper right-hand corner is this account button, where you can click to manage the team, your account, and billing information settings. To the left of that is a preview button and a share button. Preview will open a preview version of your app to click through within the Adalo editor. And share will open up a same experience, but on a different page, wherever you're hosting your progressive web app at. And finally, in the center here, we have manage and create apps. When you click this button, it'll do a drop-down menu of all of the apps within your team that you're working on, and it also allow you to create new apps and switch between apps. So once you've signed up for your Adalo account, the first thing you're going to see is a quick onboarding flow to go into the Adalo canvas, the editor. I'm going to be asking you, what kind of app do you want to make? So you have two options. You can either go with a native mobile app, so that would be an app for iOS or Android, or a progressive web app as well, which is good to know. You can build it and just publish it to the web. Or do you want to go the route of a desktop web app? Today, we're going to start with a native mobile app. And then Adalo provides all these really helpful templates if you have a good idea of what it is that you're trying to create already. So whether it's a coaching app, a chat app, directory app, ordering app, appointments app, or a to-do list app, you can start with one of those, already have the database set up, already have the screens and components in place. But for this video, we're going to be starting with the blank canvas, which is what I recommend if you don't have a great idea of what it is that you're trying to build, or if you're trying to build something very complex that, just one of these templates wouldn't help too much with. So we'll select blank. We're going to name this app new app for now. And we'll change the colors. We'll go with a green. And then for secondary color, we'll go with the blue. All right, and so here is where you select the team. If you're on multiple teams, you get all the teams that'll drop down. This is my team here, Wadalo. And you also have an option for advanced options. You can share the database with an existing app, and then we have a beta version of use external users database and authentication. Now we're just going to create a new database. So hit create. So once you are in the Adalo editor, you'll notice that it pre-populates the canvas with three screens here, a sign up, a login, and a home screen. We're actually just going to put those off to the side now so we can focus on what's going on outside of the canvas. So like I said, this middle section here is considered your canvas. This is where you'll be adding screens and components and creating the designs. Very similar to traditional design software like Adobe XD or Figma. And so we'll start here on this left navigation menu. So this button here at the top, if you click that, it'll slide out a couple of options. So you can either add a component or add a screen. And I'll go further in depth on all the different things you can add at a later time. But just as a high level overview, there's a number of different options, and it gets to be pretty extensive when you explore the marketplace, as well as figure out how to install private components from component developers. Screens, there's all kind of stock screens. I traditionally start with a blank screen though. And then just under the add button, we have a branding button. This is where you're going to configure the colors as well as the fonts for your app. And if you want to learn more about typography, you can click on this button here and it'll take you over to an article that goes in depth on how typography can impact your designs and the experience of your users. So just under branding is a section for screens. So this gives you a high-level overview of all the screens that are on your canvas. And you can see if I hover my mouse over it, it's going to find that screen, which becomes very helpful when you're working on a big app with, dozens of screens. And if you click on one of those, it'll actually pull up all of the information, all the components, the actions, and the available data on that screen specifically. Just underneath screens is database. Database is going to be where you're going to set up your database collections and then manage your existing database collections by adding or editing properties. So if you add a property, you can choose from these different property types to add to your collection. And then once you have properly configured all the properties within the collection, then you can add a record, in this case, a user, or do a bulk import. We'll be going deeper in on databases in another video. But for now, this top section here is the internal Adalo database. And you also have the option of connecting to a third-party database. Just under database is settings. Settings is where you can configure the app name, description, icon, mix panel token, select the team or see the team that this app is within. You can also configure the display settings, whether or not you want to show all the connections. You can see it populates with these little arrows here. You can manage app access, invite people to work on this app with you, copy or delete the app, as well as install a Google Maps key, which is critical for making the new location features work with our Adalo app. Just under settings, we have publish. So in this case, we're working on a mobile app. So we have the options of publishing as an Android app, an iOS app, or a progressive web app. A progressive web app is going to function pretty much the same as an Android or iOS app, except it's going to live on a domain on the World Wide Web. Just under publish, we have analytics. This is where you can manage the users and the behavior that they're taking on your application, see which screens they're visiting most often, see what kind of devices they're using to access your app, see where they're coming from, how many total signups, active users over time, and the total number of daily active users. Just under analytics is version history. This is where if you want to create multiple versions of your design, you can do so and always revert back to the original if you go in a direction that you end up not liking as much as what you had done before. You can add up to 10 versions as you go along. One thing to note is that this is not going to revert back to the way you had previously set up your database. It's just for the screens, the designs themselves. Coming down into this right-hand corner, you'll see a little help center menu. So this has quick links to find anything that you need, video tutorials, announcements, community resources, and a getting started section for beginners. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll be able to manage your teams, all the different teams that you're a part of. You can also access help and documentation, turn on developer mode, or sign out of your account. The next section is a share button. This will open up into a web preview of your app, and you can always scan it to install it onto your phone from there. Or you can do a preview, which will pull up a testing environment internally to Adalo. Lastly, you have the button in the middle here, which is where you manage and create apps. It also allows you to switch between all of the apps that are within your team's account. Now that we have gone over everything that's on the outer edges of the Adalo interface, you really understand the tools that you need in order to work with the canvas. In the next video, we'll be going into how to work with screens and components, data and actions in real time by building an application. We'll build a really simple social media app. But for now, I just want to say Thanks for watching. You now know enough to go and start making something awesome with the Dalo, so I highly recommend you do that. And if you want to learn more about myself or my agency, visit us at wadalo.co. We are Wadalo, a Washington Adalo app studio. You can also find us on the adalo.com website by going to adalo.com/experts/wadalo. Thank you very much.